Nowadays, something as small as a brake problem can shake up your whole life. It only takes one strange moment for your plans to start bending around the car. Your work, your time, your peace of mind. All of it gets interrupted by something that should have stayed simple, so why does one small brake issue feel so much bigger than it used to? The job that used to be simple. Back in the past, it was easy to change your brake pads. If something felt wrong, you usually knew it right away. Maybe the brakes started making a sharp squealing sound. Maybe the pedal felt softer than usual. Maybe the car took a little longer to stop, or the steering wheel shook when you braked. The warning signs were physical, obvious, and easy to connect to a real part of the car. That is because older brake systems were built in a very direct way. You pressed the brake pedal, brake fluid carried that force through the lines, and the caliper pushed the pads against the rotor to slow the wheel down. It was simple cause and effect. Like squeezing a clamp on a spinning plate, the pads created friction, and the car slowed down. The brake pad itself was just a wear item, like the sole of a shoe. It was always expected to wear down, and it was always expected to be replaced. Even the rear brakes were usually easy to understand. On many older cars and trucks in America, like a Ford F-150, Chevy Silverado, Toyota Camry, or Honda Accord, you were dealing with either rear drum brakes or a basic rear disc setup. The parking brake was mechanical too. It worked through a lever, a pedal, or a cable. It was not asking permission from a control unit. It was just hardware pulling on hardware. That was the key difference. The system made sense with your hands, your ears, and a few basic tools. You could hear the problem, feel the problem, find the worn part, and change it. But then modern cars arrived and brake design started to change with them. And once cars were built to depend more on electronics, the old brake pad job stopped being just a simple piece of maintenance. 2. Why electronics took over your brakes. Not all of this happened for no reason. The old brake setup had its own annoyances. If you stopped on a hill, you had to hold the car with your foot, then move quickly to the gas without letting it roll backward. If your parking brake cable had aged or stretched, the feel could become inconsistent. Some days it held firmly, some days it didn't feel quite the same. And in cold or wet conditions, that cable could even stick or freeze. Those small things sound minor, but they add up in real life. You're on an uphill street, traffic behind you, and the light turns green. You lift off the brake, move to the gas, and the car drifts back just a little. That tiny moment of hesitation can be enough to tap the car behind you. It's not dramatic, but it's stressful. And it's exactly the kind of everyday situation car makers were trying to fix. So the move toward electronic control actually makes sense. I've seen how these systems are described. The core hardware doesn't disappear. You still have pads, rotors, and hydraulic pressure doing the real work. What changes is the layer that controls it. Instead of relying on cables and driver timing, the car uses small electric motors and control logic to decide when to hold and when to release the brakes. The goal is to make everything more consistent, more predictable, and easier to manage. And when you look at it that way, it's hard to argue against it. The system can hold the car in place on a hill without you thinking about it. It can release smoothly when you press the accelerator. In traffic, it can keep the car stopped without you constantly holding the brake pedal. To make this easier to picture, look at something like a 2025 Honda Accord. The braking hardware is still familiar disc brakes on all 4 wheels pads, creating friction just like before. But now the car can automatically apply the parking brake when you shut it off and release it when you drive away. It can hold the car still at a stop, then let go the moment you press the gas. It feels like the car is handling the small details for you, and at first it really does feel like an upgrade. Everything is smoother, more controlled, less effort on your part. You start to feel like the old hassles are gone for good. But then one day the brakes stop behaving the way you expect them to, and that's when the trouble finally starts to show. 3. The day a brake job stopped being simple. When this system starts giving you trouble, it does not feel like the old brake problems people were used to. Back then, if something was wrong, it usually felt familiar. The pedal went soft. The car pulled a little when you braked. The parking brake did not hold as well on a hill. It was annoying, but at least it made sense. You could feel that something physical had worn down or gone out of adjustment. Now it feels different. The brakes do not just feel weak or worn, they start acting strange. The parking brake will not release the way you expect. A warning pops up. The car tells you to press this hold to try again. And that is the moment it hits you. You are not just dealing with a worn part anymore. You are dealing with a system that wants everything done in the right order before it agrees to cooperate. That is the big change. On an older car, you were still dealing directly with the mechanism. You pulled a lever, pushed a pedal, felt the tension, and knew what the car was doing. On a newer setup, there is something sitting in between you and the brakes now. A switch, a motor, a layer of logic. So even before you repair anything, the whole relationship already feels different. The brake is no longer just a piece of hardware. It has become a procedure, and that really sinks in the moment you try to service it yourself. Take a 2022 Ford Maverick. This is where the whole thing stops feeling like a normal brake job and starts feeling weirdly formal. On an older rear brake setup, you could get the wheel off, pull the caliper, push the piston back, swap the pads, and move on with your day. Maybe your hands got dirty, maybe a bolt fought you a little. But it was still your job to do. With something like the Maverick, even getting started can turn into its own little ritual. You cannot just walk up to the rear brakes and begin. First, the car has to be put into the right mode. Then the sequence has to be followed properly. Only after that are you really allowed to touch the brakes. So at that point, you think, fine, annoying, but once that is done, I can finally just replace the pads. But no, not quite. Because even after the new parts are in, you are still not really finished. You still have to bring the system back out of that special mode. You still have to make sure the electronic side accepts the repair. And that is the part that really gets under your skin. It is not just one extra step. It is that feeling of, seriously, there is more. Every time you think the job is over, the car seems to say not yet. Not? That is why this no longer feels like the kind of thing people naturally do at home. It is not because brake pads stopped being simple parts. They still wear out like they always did. The difference is everything standing between you and that simple replacement. And sure, you can always take it to a shop. If the place has the right tools, the right software, and a decent owner who actually cares, the whole thing can go smoothly. It can look quick, clean, even efficient. But that is only one part of the problem, because the bigger part does not really hit until later when you are back home and start realizing what this job has turned into. Efficient for the car, expensive for your life. There is another part of this story people do not talk about enough, and that is what this kind of repair does to your actual life. Years ago, a brake job was the sort of thing that could live inside a Saturday afternoon. You heard the pads starting to complain, you set some time aside, got the wheel off, pushed the piston back, swapped the pads, and moved on. It was never fun, but it was contained. It stayed in its place. Now it does not stay in its place anymore. Now the problem starts the moment you notice something is off. Maybe the parking brake feels strange. Maybe a warning shows up. Maybe the rear brakes are not acting the way you expect. And from that moment on, it is no longer just about fixing the pads. It becomes time on your phone, time searching, time calling shops, time figuring out who can even handle that system properly. And that is where the frustration really starts, because most people do not have empty days waiting around for a brake problem. You have work, you have deadlines, your wife needs help with something at home, your kid has a school meeting, the sink still leaks, the grass still needs cutting. Life is already full, and now this one repair wants to sit right in the middle of all of it. Then there is the complexity of it. This is the part that really wears people down. On paper, it is still a brake job. In real life, it does not feel that way. Take something like a Mazda CX-5 with an electronic parking brake. You do not just replace the rear pads and call it done. The system has to be put into the right service state before the work starts, and then brought back out properly after the work is finished. So you go through the steps, get the hardware done, fit the new parts, and for one brief second you think finally that should be it. But no, not yet. There is still another check, another step, another chance for a warning light to stay on and send you back into troubleshooting. That is the part that gets under your skin, not the dirt, not the tools. The feeling that even after you did the repair, the car still has one more question for you. And of course, taking it to a shop is easier. In many cases, it is the smarter move. A good shop with the right scan tool and a technician who knows the procedure can get through it much faster than you can at home. But then the bill comes. That is where the next headache begins. A professional brake pad job on a newer vehicle can easily land in the low hundreds for just one axle, and if rotors are involved, the number climbs even faster. Suddenly, one brake repair is eating the same money you use for fuel, groceries, and the rest of ordinary life. That is what makes this whole thing feel so heavy. Yes, it is optimized. Yes, it is efficient. But when it goes wrong, it takes your time, your attention, and your cash all at once. And the worst part is most of the time there is not much else you can do. So if this design is so frustrating once something goes wrong, why do car makers keep building it this way, instead of making brake service simpler for the people who actually have to live with it? 5 Why car makers won't make it simple again. Car makers did not end up here by accident. They kept moving toward this kind of brake design because, from their point of view, it fixes real problems. Older setups asked more from the driver every single day. On a hill, you had to hold the car yourself and move off cleanly. In traffic, your right foot and your attention were always busy. Even the parking brake could feel a little different as the years went by and the hardware aged. Newer systems smooth out a lot of that friction. They can keep the car steady more cleanly, release more smoothly, and take some of the little stressful moments out of ordinary driving. That is the part worth admitting. When everything works, modern brake control really does make a car feel calmer and more polished. Once the industry started chasing that smoother experience, it was never going to stop at one small improvement. The brakes are now tied into a much bigger idea of what a modern car should feel like. Hill starts get easier. Stop-and-go traffic becomes less annoying. The whole vehicle starts behaving in a more controlled, more seamless way. From a factory point of view, that kind of connected behavior is hard to give up. A car that manages more of these little tasks on its own feels newer, cleaner, and more refined to the average buyer. The economic side is where the mood changes. The more a car depends on electronic systems, the more the owner depends on the people and places that know how to handle those systems properly. On the surface, it feels convenient. Underneath, it creates dependence. Once something goes wrong, you are no longer dealing with a simple worn part by itself. You may need special tools, the correct software, the right sequence, and a technician who knows how to walk the car through all of it. And once repairs start working like that, the money naturally flows toward the manufacturer, the dealer network, or the shops that are fully equipped to live inside that world. That does not automatically make the whole thing sinister. In one sense, that money also helps support better service, better tools, and the kind of convenience people now expect. But it absolutely changes the feeling of ownership. Years ago, small actions made you feel connected to the machine. You pulled a lever, you felt the resistance. You knew your hand had done something real. Now a lot of that direct feeling gets filtered through button sensors and systems, making decisions in the background. That is the trade. The car gets smarter, smoother, and easier in many ways. The experience also becomes less human. At times, it almost feels like someone else is helping drive the car with you, even though your hands are still on the wheel. Still, this is the road the industry chose, and it is not turning back. So the better question now is not why the old brake job disappeared. The better question is how to live with these newer systems without letting them drain your time, your money, and your peace of mind. 6. How to live with modern brakes. The first part is simple drive in a way that gives your brakes an easier life. A lot of brake wear comes from habits people do every day without thinking. Hard stops, rushing up to red lights, riding the brake downhill, resting your foot lightly on the pedal in traffic, all of that adds heat, friction, and wear. A smoother driving style helps more than people think. Leave a little more space. Slow down earlier. Let the car settle instead of always charging forward and then stopping hard. It is better for the pads, better for the rotors, and honestly better for your stress too. The second part is paying attention earlier. Do not wait until the car is practically begging for help. If the brakes start making a steady metal-on-metal sound, if a warning message shows up, if the parking brake starts acting differently, do not just hope it goes away. Small brake problems have a bad habit of turning into more expensive ones. Pads become rotors. A quick inspection turns into a bigger repair. Catching it early is not just good maintenance. It is one of the easiest ways to protect your wallet. The third part is understanding your car before something goes wrong. If your vehicle has an electronic parking brake or brake hold, take 10 minutes one evening and learn the basics. Know how the system releases? Know what the warning lights mean? Save the owner's manual on your phone if you have to. That way, the first time you learn how your brake system works is not in a parking lot when you are already irritated and late for something. And when the day comes that you do need service, go in prepared. Have your VIN ready. Know what the car is doing when it happens and what warning message came up. Ask for a written estimate. Ask whether the price is for one axle or both. Ask whether that number includes pads only or rotors too. Those few questions can save you money, time, and a lot of confusion. None of this makes modern brake systems charming. It just makes them easier to live with. And that is really the best strategy. Now stay a step ahead, stay organized, and do not let a brake problem turn into a full week headache. You see, cars have changed and the way we deal with them has changed too. Some things got easier, some got more complicated. But that doesn't mean you've lost control completely. It just means the rules are different now. If you stay aware, stay prepared, and understand how your car actually works, you can still keep things simple on your side. You don't need to fight the system, you just need to stay one step ahead of it. And once you do even something as frustrating as a brake, problem becomes a lot more manageable.